officially get started. Welcome everyone to the next session of our Spring 2023 series of Tuesday Times Roundtable. TTR is the Office of Global Learning Initiative's flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends. You can learn more about TTR, watch past recordings, or come back to reference this one at go.fiu.edu/TTR. Today's session is also part of FIU's 8th Annual Holocaust and Genocide Awareness Week. You can see the full lineup of their campus-wide events happening all week and into next week at go.fiu.edu/HGAW2023. We'll drop that link in the chat as well. My name is Michelle Zaldivar. I'm your Senior Program Coordinator here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. A special thank you and shout out to our Assistant Director, Anna Prado, who is monitoring the chat and answering your questions. Some of our discussion today may prompt you to share some sensitive personal experiences. So while we absolutely encourage you to share your experiences freely, we remind you that these sessions are recorded. If you would prefer to share your thoughts privately through the chat, please feel free to do so with either myself or Anna Prado again, and we can share your experiences aloud. If you haven't already, please take a moment to sign in using the QR code that you see on the screen, or we will drop the short link in the chat as well so that you can do the sign in. Especially if you are trying to capture your attendance for any sort of honors college, global learning medallion, extra credit for a professor that recommended you to come today, make sure you take a moment to sign in. As always, TTR is made possible through a formal partnership with the OGLI, Office of Global Learning Initiatives here at FIU, and the New York Times. This partnership provides FIU community with free digital access to the New York Times. You can read the article tied to today's session. It's really a jump-off point for today's session at go.fiu.edu/TTR0124. If you get there and you hit a paywall, I remind you that, again, you can set up that free digital access at accessnyt.com. Make sure to use your @fiu.edu email for that registration. Today is the last week, or this coming week is the last week for submissions for the OGLI's Transformation Contest. In this contest, we ask students to share some international or intercultural experience through any expressive medium, be it art, writing, photography, movies, absolutely anything that you feel comfortable expressing yourself through. There are limitations on the length of each one of those submission types, so make sure to check out details at go.fiu.edu/GL contest, or you can follow the QR code that's on the screen for you now. Deadline for submissions is next Tuesday, January 31st. And if I've been saying all of these things like medallion or my Enacting Global Learning micro-credential students that might be joining us as well today, maybe we have some Millennium Fellows in the room and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, I invite you to come to our next GL FIU session. GL at FIU session is going to be tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday at 1 p.m. You can join us at that Zoom fully online session about the Global Learning Medallion and other student programs that we offer here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives at go.fiu.edu/GLinfo. To get us started today, I'm actually going to introduce us to the context of our discussion through a video. So we're going to take a few minutes to watch this video together, contextualize our discussion, and then I will introduce our speakers for today. As soon as I do hit play, if I can get a thumbs up from somebody that might be able to tell me if we've got good audio, that would be fantastic.
In the past few weeks across our state, we've seen a number of anti-Semitic messages. We're not showing them, but they range from flyers with disturbing phrases to an image on a building in West Palm Beach over the weekend. West Palm Beach Mayor Keith James says these actions are not tolerated in the city. He posted on social media, in part, quote, "I condemn these acts and the cowards who commit them. I also reiterate my commitment to making West Palm Beach a community of opportunity and inclusion for all." Reporter Sofia Hernandez is going in depth looking into why these incidents are occurring more frequently and the push to stop them.
On Saturday in West Palm Beach, a swastika was displayed on a building in downtown. Also over the weekend, flyers with anti-Semitic language and pictures were found outside homes in Boca Raton. These are the most recent incidents in a series of anti-Semitic messages.
People are looking for, I don't know, ways to get noticed.
Oren Stier, the director of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Florida International University, says messages like these are copycats of prior incidents, like flyers outside of hundreds of homes in South Florida last year.
Every few months, somebody gets the idea to do this. I think it's people with too much time on their hands and who are just not able to realize the gravity of the situation of what they're doing.
According to a new report released by the Anti-Defamation League this month, more than 85% of Americans believe at least one anti-Jewish trope. In 2019, that number was 61%. Now, more than 20% of Americans believe more than 6 anti-Jewish tropes. In 2019, that number was just 11%. So what's behind the increase in recent years? Stier attributes it to 4 reasons. The first is that the concept of anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory.
You know, there are 2 things about a conspiracy theory. One is that you can never prove a conspiracy theory wrong, right? You can never say that you know, they're not all out to get me. But the other thing is that that conspiracy theories always rise in times of economic instability and uncertainty. People are always looking around for someone to blame. And the scapegoating phenomenon increases.
The other major reason is social media.
We don't talk to people with different views anymore. So if somebody goes into that bubble and puts out an anti-Semitic idea, it's less likely that anyone is going to say, hey, that's wrong. Hey, that's hateful. Hey, that's incorrect. They're just going to keep kind of building on each other. So it's going to snowball.
Stier says the last 2 reasons are just mainstream, simple hate that is not corrected or stopped, and a lack of education, individuals not being informed, and they haven't developed their own thoughtful viewpoints. It's because of these reasons and more that our reporting partner at WJAX-TV says Jacksonville City Council will be voting on a proposal next week that would make it illegal to make projections on a private building without a permit. While the language of the bill has yet to be finalized, Stier says it's a good first step. However, in order for real change to happen, he thinks more conversations are needed.
This country has a strong and well-entrenched and really important tradition of free speech. And I don't think anybody wants to infringe on that. But I think it's important for cities and states and the whole country to grapple with what are the limits of free speech, right? What is not acceptable? What is veering into hate speech? What is veering into incitement?
Hoping those discussions can help stop these incidents in Florida. Sophia Hernandez, Florida 24 Network.
January 27th is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Starting Thursday, Florida
Zoom delay on everything. Okay, so to officially get started today, Dr. Oren Stier is leading our session and we'll introduce the rest of our esteemed panelists. But first, our introduction of Dr. Stier. He is the Graduate Program Director for the Department of Religious Studies, the Director of Judaic Studies Program here at FIU, and organizer of the Holocaust and Genocide Awareness Week, a campus-wide week-long observance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day happening this Friday, January 27th. His area of interest is Jewish cultural studies, with a special emphasis on present-day Jewish life and thought. Many of his publications, including his 2 books, address the roles of contemporary media and modes of cultural mediation and how they shape the consciousness of the legacy of the Holocaust, especially in the form of its institutionalized memory. You can see the full lineup of events again of the Holocaust and Genocide Awareness Week at go.fiu.edu/HGAW 2023. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Stier and our esteemed panelists for today's session, The Threat of Anti-Semitism in the U.S. Today.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see so many people here today. So we conceived of this panel back in October when Kanye West famously went off on Twitter saying the following: "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." The funny thing is I actually can't be anti-Semitic because Black people are actually Jew. Also, you guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who opposes your agenda. And I think there's a lot to unpack there. And certainly what West was saying ended up snowballing in subsequent days and weeks. After his DEFCON 3 remark, he went out in social media discussing common anti-Semitic tropes like Jews control the media, Jews control world finances, Jews control world governments, Jews exploit others, and Jews are not even the real Jews. And the question we want to throw out there for today's discussion is, obviously we don't want to make this a referendum on Kanye West or Kyrie Irving or any of the other incidents that happened last fall, but these issues keep happening and they keep coming up. And are they perhaps symptoms of something larger? We would argue yes. There's clearly a documented rise in anti-Semitic activity. In the article that was linked to today's session, Brett Stevens noted that Jews constitute about just under 2.5% of the total adult population in the United States, but actually are on the receiving end of, get this, nearly 55% of all religiously motivated hate crimes, right? Nearly 2% of the population, but over 50% of all the religiously motivated hate crimes. So seriously, there's something going on out there. What is this threat of anti-Semitism in the US today? How do we unpack it and how do we understand it? So with that, I'd like to introduce today's panelists. First, we have Danielle Yablonka. She's 22 years old from Miami, Florida. Her love for Israel advocacy began while interning for StandWithUs in high school and has since evolved into her greatest passion. Currently, she's a senior at Florida Atlantic University, majoring in communication with a minor in Jewish studies. On campus, you can find her either volunteering at Hillel events or collaborating with multicultural student groups. Off campus, Danielle works as a marketing and media manager for the Israel nonprofit Maccabee Task Force, in addition to being a childcare provider and fashion model. And second, we have Dr. Samuel Edelman. He's an emeritus professor of Jewish, Israel, and Holocaust studies, as well as rhetoric communication studies, and has served as the first executive director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East and dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the American Jewish University in LA. Currently, in his semi-retirement, he's one of the founding faculty members and executive director of the new Academic Council for Israel and a member of the Academic Engagement Network. Edelman is an adjunct professor of Israel Studies and Zionism at the University of Miami and a lecturer at FAU's Lifelong Learning Society. He's the former director of the Israel on Campus Coalition Academic Affairs Department and the National Academic Network and its Fellows Program. In addition to being one of the key academics fighting against BDS on campuses and in academic professional organizations, he continues to lecture and teach on a range of relevant subjects. So please join me in welcoming Danielle and Sam to the panel today. Danielle, I wanted to start with you because I know that in our prep for today's discussion, you mentioned that these events that were documented in the news report we started with that was just from last week, these events that date back the last few months with Kanye West and all of the increasing anti-Semitic rhetoric touch you in a very personal way. Could you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here on this panel, and thank you guys, everyone here, for showing up and listening. This past week at my university, we had OWL Involved, which is basically rushing for clubs on campus. And it was a normal Wednesday afternoon, and some students ran up to me and said, there is a table on the breezeway, which is our long outdoor space, that says yay 2024, Kanye is right. Sorry, I got a little nervous. Kanye is right. And I immediately freaked out. But my initial reaction was, first of all, let's check it out and see if they're right. They were right. And secondly, we went back to Hillel and got some posters. And instead of fighting with them, because all they were looking for was a reaction, we stood there peacefully and protested with signs that said, you don't have to, what does it say? You don't have to be Jewish to fight anti-Semitism, some statistics about the Holocaust and different statistics about the things that Kanye said were wrong. So following that event, first of all, as a Jewish student on campus, it was very scary for me to have known they're very well-known neo-Nazis online, and it was very scary to see them on my campus. And because of free speech, and freedom of place, they were allowed to be there, and I couldn't believe it. And it was also scary to see other students walk up to them and shake their hands and take selfies with them, giving a thumbs up. After that, my name was floated on social media from different anti-Semitism awareness accounts. And if you go to the next slide.
Great. Yeah, I've heard some of the songs.
So as you can see, following that, I became the face of the neo-Nazi social media, a target online, some of the nastiest anti-Semitic tropes I've ever seen. And it's really funny, the week before I was saying, wow, it would never happen to me, my campus. This would never happen to me on my campus. And little did I know, it happened to me on my campus. So it's important to not get too comfortable when you think that it's not going to happen to you. Here it is. And not only are they attacking my Jewish identity, but they're attacking the way I look. They're attacking, they're bringing up old anti-Semitic tropes. Dr. Edelman can speak on those cartoons that are displayed. If you go to the next slide too, there are a lot of, there are a couple more, just all of them defending Kanye in the name of Kanye. It's scary to see that a celebrity can inspire so much hate online. I think that's where it gets you, where these people have just been hiding for so long, and all of a sudden they feel comfortable enough to say 109 countries were right, Ye is right, and they're referring to the 109 countries Jews have been exiled from in history, and they're alluding to the fact that the US should also kick the Jews out of the country. Please jump in, Dr. Edelman.
You know what, so I guess, why don't I turn it, thank you, Danielle, so much.
Yeah.
And some of this, the response that you received is really, truly shocking. I'm gonna wanna circle back to that experience on campus, and, you know, questions about, I guess, how serious some of these groups are, but I'm wondering, Sam, if you could give us a little bit of context to this issue, some of the history of anti-Semitism, and how we can understand these recent experiences, which might be surprising to some people.
Yeah, Oren, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be involved with this. And Danielle, I'm sorry that you have had to go through this situation so directly and so personally. You know, anti-Semitism is called the longest hate for a reason, because it's existed for more than 2,400 years, since the ancient Greeks and Romans. Anti-Semitism and even the ancient Persians were involved in anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish kinds of things. I call it anti-Jewish because the use of Semites is a word that's created by the haters themselves. So anyway, so 2,400 years of this kind of hatred has been going on. And as Oren quite rightly said at the beginning, this is one of the longest held collection of conspiracy theories ever. The interesting thing is that in each case of major historic anti-Semitic activity from the, as I said, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, those morphed into early Christianities, which began as a Jewish, an extension of Judaism in the 1st century CE, to become a major religion, but it was in part based on attacking the mother religion of Judaism, to deny it, because Jews did not accept that religious expression, did not accept that Jesus was divine, etc. And so that led to a whole series of writings by early Christian writers that attacked the very core of Judaism, in spite of the fact that the 5 books of Moses are the central part of the Christian Bible. They nevertheless began to attack Judaism because they were replacing it. with a new religion. And then when Islam was derived from out of the Arabian Peninsula and took on bits and pieces of both Judaism and Christianity and Zoroastrianism and other religious expressions, early Islamic writers began to absorb Christian anti-Semitism into their own writing, and so they continued it. And that kind of religious anti-Semitism has been the major force of anti-Semitism historically up until the 19th century, when it morphed into something new. And that something new is what many of us call political anti-Semitism, where it moves away from a religious perspective into a political one. And here's the fascinating part, because it comes from both the left, there's anti-Semitism on the left, and there's anti-Semitism on the right. It's not just fascists and Nazis, but also Marxists and communists, and even some socialists have been involved in perpetrating anti-Semitic conspiracies and attacking Jews roundly. The Soviet Union under communism attacked Jews, as well as Hitler and the Nazis. Both Stalin and Hitler murdered millions of Jews, as well as others, but 6 million by the Nazis and a few million by the communists. All of this is part and parcel of what's happening with modern contemporary anti-Semitism. Now let's go to the United States. In the early years of the United States, anti-Semitism was generally a kind of undercurrent, but not a big deal. Washington and Jefferson and all the founding fathers and mothers of the United States were very encompassing and very accepting of the Jewish community. And it is not until during and after the Civil War that we saw a shift in American attitudes toward Jews. And attitudes became more and more crystallized around anti-Semitism. In fact, after the Grant administration, Grant was pretty good about the Jewish community, even though he had some problems with anti-Jewish tropes. During the Civil War, he changed. But after Grant, all of a sudden there began to explode anti-Semitic tropes, like some of the pictures that you saw being used to attack Danielle. Those pictures are a trope. The idea that Jews control banking, the Jews control the media, the Jews control every event of human life, that's a conspiracy theory, has no basis in truth whatsoever, but these continue to be used. In fact, Oren, you can interrupt me any time here when you want me to finish. In fact, the same tropes that are used to attack Jews today and in the past are also being used to attack have been used to attack Native Americans and Asians and African Americans, and even the LGBTQ plus community. The same tropes, the same cartoons, they just keep replicating over and over and over again to use to others. So in a way, what's going on to the Jewish community is the canary in the mine. When it happens to the Jews, eventually happens to others. And we see this as the perfect example of this is both in Nazi Europe. They started with the Jews, and everyone and all these other different communities were attacked eventually by the Nazis. Here in the United States today, we have seen a rise of anti-Semitism that took place between the 1880s and the 1950s that was horrific. The level of anti-Semitism in the US in that period of time almost was at the same level of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany and Europe. The difference was that in the United States, we didn't go the next step of rounding Jews up and murdering them, but we came very close to being as anti-Semitic as Germany was. And then by the 1960s, after the creation of the State of Israel and the Six-Day War, between the Six-Day War and 2000, there seemed to be a diminution of anti-Semitism. It kind of went underground. And then in 2000, it exploded again, in part connected with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the attempt to attack Israel as, to make Israel like the Jew of nations and attack it like Jews had been attacked in an anti-Semitic way. So all of this is kind of historical overview of what we're going through at the moment. What's happening now, this very moment, is that anti-Semitism is being perpetrated on the left by those who are opposed to the state of Israel, but also include Jews as part of that. And any Jew who supports Israel on the left is sometimes treated as a pariah. And then on the right, by the Proud Boys and the neo-Nazis and the Oath Keepers and those groups that connected with the white supremacist movement, who've been kind of exploded outward during the Trump administration, giving kind of permission for them to speak out and become more vocal. This is fascism trying to reassert itself, but the problem that fascism has today is that it's got baggage. It's got 6 million Jews, dead Jews as baggage. And to fight that, the anti-Semitism from the right has got to deny that the Holocaust happened. And we also have anti-Semitism popping out in the African-American community, especially with regard to Farrakhan, who is a notorious anti-Semitic leader in the African-American community, who's generated many followers. And this group called the Hebrew Israelites, who view themselves in a way as supplanting Jews in the world. So I'm going to stop there. Oren, Danielle.
Sam, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. That's a very concise and informative history. Danielle, you wanted to jump in?
Sure. I was just going to say, I know many students from across the United States. I work with a lot of students from across the US and different campuses all over who've experienced anti-Semitism on both sides of the spectrum. Here, I just told you guys about my experience with Proud Boys last week on my campus, showing up with their Kanye is right propaganda. But I have friends who get spat on by their fellow students on their campuses for being Jewish or for supporting Israel. It's become a scary place on campus. I have friends on college campuses who can't wear their Jewish stars in public because they're afraid. I have friends who I just got back from a fellowship in Israel and the UAE, and they couldn't post that they were in Israel. And that was both Jewish and non-Jewish students on these fellowships. So it's a scary place on campus right now. And I just wanted to say that, yes. And social media. Yeah, please.
Yeah, well, since we are both campus-based and also social media-based, we have a poll. I'd love to post now if we've got over 100 participants now. We're wondering if you have personally experienced anti-Semitism, if you've ever personally experienced anti-Semitism. Please respond to the poll. This is really going to give us a chance to have a sense of who's out there and what your experiences have been. And we're very interested in hearing those of you who are interested in maybe contributing to the discussion based on your experience.
While we wait for more of those poll responses to come in, which we are at about 70 participants so far, I'll remind you again that if you, as Dr. Stier welcomed you to share your perspectives, if you're uncomfortable doing so by unmuting yourself and sharing out loud, you can absolutely send whatever you'd like to share to either myself or Anna via the chat and the direct messages, and we can share on your behalf.
And we can keep your name anonymous as well if you prefer.
Absolutely.
So how are we doing at poll participation, Michelle?
We're at 83 and still slowly climbing. So you want to give it a couple more seconds?
About 10 more seconds, folks, for you to respond to our very simple poll. We're really curious to hear what your experiences have been regarding anti-Semitism personally. Okay, why don't we close the poll and see what the results are? Wow, okay.
Wow.
I'm just fascinated by this. 11% of about 100 participants here have experienced it personally. 36%, just over a third, no, but I know people who have. 46%, nearly half, no, I've never had any personal experience with anti-Semitism. And then the last one, 7%, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to recognize anti-Semitism. I want to start with the last one. Sam or Danielle, you can flip a coin, but what do you say to the people who say, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to recognize anti-Semitism? How do we define anti-Semitism? How do we understand it? How would you know it if it happened to you?
So I'm going to give a small, like a experiential quick, and then Sam will give you the proper definition, I feel like, more or less. But for me, when I was in high school, I was on a summer program, and I was sitting in a room in a genealogy class, and we were going around talking about our experiences. And one of the students told us that she was so happy to be at this program because she couldn't express her Judaism back home. She was from Slovakia, and she couldn't express her Judaism publicly because in Slovakia, it's not cool to be a Jew. It's actually frowned upon. And she said that before she left for the summer program, her teacher had gone around the classroom asking, what are students doing for the summer? And she said, I'm going to a camp for the summer. And the teacher in front of the whole class asked her, oh, haha, are you going to be the Jew or the Nazi? And for me, I was only about 16 years old when I heard this story, and I started crying when I was sitting there in the room, and I couldn't believe that someone my age was sitting right next to me, and she was going to go home. I was going to go home and boast about this amazing experience I had with fellow Jewish students, and to know that someone my age on the other side of the world can't go home and talk about her experiences or light Shabbat candles on Friday or wear her Jewish star proudly because she will be persecuted for it back home. And that's when I knew anti-Semitism was a thing, and it was something important for me to talk about. And so that, to me, when you're not able to wear your star proudly or openly say that you're Jewish, that's anti-Semitism. That there's something wrong there. And I'm going to let Dr. Edelman, give the proper definition of anti-Semitism.
Would you bring up the International Holocaust? Okay, what we have here is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It's an alliance of some 100 different organizations and nations that are involved in Holocaust education and fighting anti-Semitism and things of that sort. And so the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, it's called the IHRA Working Definition of Anti-Semitism, is a definition that has been taken on by governments, by school districts, by universities, by the
including
Department of
FIU.
Education. Say that again?
Including FIU.
And including FIU. Including the Florida Democratic Party has accepted this definition. The just past chair of the Democratic Party accepted this definition. So it's good to just say it. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Very simple, straightforward definition. If you say all Jews are, you're an anti-Semite, because all Jews aren't. There are a variety of different Jewish expressions, and cultural and religious, and there's not a monolithic Jewish vision. So that's part of the issue here. Characterizations that Jews run the media, or Jews run banking, or Jews control whatever, immediately you know that that person who's saying that is an anti-Semite, because all Jews don't. And in fact, for more than almost 2,000 years, Jews were not permitted to be involved in banking in Europe and even in the United States and across the world. They were forbidden. You know, all kinds of mythologies are here being embellished. There's a common trope, anti-Semitic trope, that Jews drain the blood of Christian or Muslim children and make matzahs. That's completely without founding, and it's just disgusting. In fact, there's a prohibition against blood within Jewish law and lore. This is just craziness, but that's the image that is being portrayed under anti-Semitism.
So,
and in the,
Sam, I just wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to go to the 3Ds as a.
So I wanted to, right. So maybe just a little bit of context, because, you know, we're often hearing, as you mentioned earlier, that we see anti-Semitism both on the left and on the right. Some examples might be on the right, the events in Charlottesville, right? Neo-Nazis marching with torches. They were actually protesting the removal of a Civil War hero monument, but they, on the way, they were chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and expressing a lot of neo-Nazi ideas. But also you get anti-Semitism on the left, and the biggest example of that is probably anti-Zionism and anti-Israel sentiment. And I was wondering, Sam, if you could, in that context, explain this idea of the 3Ds, and a little bit more about the different anti-Semitisms on the left and the right.
So the 3Ds were created by Natan Sharansky, who was a very important legislator in Israel, but also a refusenik in the Soviet Union. He was put in prison. He was horribly treated and eventually was released, and he went to live in Israel. And he's become a major force and advocate to fight against anti-Semitism. And while he was in the Israeli government, he came up with this idea of 3Ds, the issue of demonization. When you demonize Israel, Israel's leaders, or Jews in general as completely evil and causing all kinds of other problems, that means that you are involved in an illegitimate analysis, lacking critical thinking, of course, but also because you have made the allness error. You have demonized a people and a country. And the idea of putting them into this category is a way to scapegoat, to say, my problems aren't my problems, they're caused by the Jews. And the Jews are the demons of the world, of the evil. My kids, I'm going to tell you a story. My kids hated when Halloween would come by because I would lecture them about the witches and goblins and all the different evil demons that they were portraying in the costumes that they wore at Halloween. And I said, do you realize this is from the medieval period? And these demons that you're portraying were for the medieval mind Jews. And I said, and so I ruined Halloween for them forever. It just destroyed it. So demonization is one. Second is double standard. If you attack Israel or Zionism, and that alone, and you don't, if you say Israel does not have the right to exist, but you say a Palestinian state does, then you're involved in a double standard. Why would you say one can exist and the other cannot? And so double standard is when criticism of Israel goes beyond legitimate criticism. You can criticize an individual Israeli policy. For example, the new government that Netanyahu is leading is beginning to talk about changes in the judiciary. Well, I'm very critical of that. And I can be critical of that because it's a policy, but I'm not critical. I'm not saying that Israel is evil or that Israel is an apartheid state or Israel should not exist. I'm critical of Israel because I can do that. If you say that Israel cannot exist, then that means that no nation should exist.
Which
and
is
finally,
which is really the example of delegitimization.
Yes.
So you ultimately have these three tests, which I think are very useful for clarifying for people, if we're talking about anti-Semitism or not. I wanted to get back to some of the poll responses. I know maybe a couple of people are interested or willing. I don't know if anybody has written Michelle wanting to voice their thoughts privately, but we've got a little bit over 10% who experienced anti-Semitism personally. And I'm just wondering if anybody is interested in sharing briefly their experience.
We haven't gotten any personally in the chat. We have gotten a couple of questions. So I just want to assure everyone that in a couple of minutes, we'll also move to Q&A.
Yes, we'll definitely get to Q&A. Danielle, would you like to contribute something?
Yeah, I would. I'll tell you another anti-Semitism story. But this all started for me in high school on Multicultural Day I went to design and architecture senior high. I'm from Miami. And it was Multicultural Day and they didn't have an Israel flag. So I was coloring my own Israel flag. And some boys came up to me and asked if they could color my flag and help me color it in. And I was like, yeah, you can help me color in my flag. And so they actually, when I wasn't looking, drew a big swastika in the middle of it. And for me, that was my first experience personally with anti-Semitism. People making, I just want to make it clear, as a student, as a fellow student, I assume that most of you listening are students. As a student, when someone's making Holocaust jokes, that's anti-Semitic. And if you're a Jewish student and allowing other students to make Holocaust jokes, that's not okay. It goes for any, not just Judaism, not just the Holocaust, it goes for gay jokes, Black jokes. It's not, none of it is okay. And you as a person, as a Jewish person, if you are condoning it, you are allowing and saying them yourself, you are allowing other people to do so as well. So that, to me, that's anti-Semitism. And I hope that you'll all, after this Zoom call, after this panel, be more weary of it and conscious of the choices you make and the things you say, and hopefully have the confidence to stand up against it and speak out when people are saying Holocaust jokes or Jew jokes or any type of joke. You don't just have to stand up for yourself, but stand up for others.
Can I add something to what Danielle said, Oren? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
You know, the delegitimization part that Sharansky talks about has application to what Danielle just said. She was involved in a multicultural event. And the problem that for the Jewish community is that we have been eliminated from many different groups, ethnic groups who are involved, who view themselves as being non-white and non-privileged. Jews, in fact, on college campuses and in many in the political scene are considered by some as white privileged. But the reality is that up until the 1970s, Jews were in the United States not considered white. And I'm going to say something that may sound strange to some people. Even though my family in the 1890s came from Europe, while they were in Europe, they were not considered European by the people who they lived around, and they did not consider themselves European. They considered themselves as a Middle Eastern, non-Arab minority. And that's what Jews are. They are descended from people who came from what we call the land of Israel, and today is modern Israel, and they have been connected with the land of Israel for more than almost 3,000 years of our historical existence. But certainly, even during periods of exile, Jews were connected to and lived in and around the land of Israel. So we have been systematically eliminated from multicultural issues, from this idea that's called intersectionality, which deals with how various minority groups and gays and lesbians and LGBT community are all intertwined in some fashion by discrimination in the United States and elsewhere. And the reality is we too, as Jews, are the same as African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, Latina, Hispanic-speaking peoples, et cetera, all of us, and the LGBTQ community. We have come from the same root. We've suffered the same kinds of discrimination and hate in the United States that others have. But yet there has been a systematic removal of Jews from all of these issues. In fact, the whole issue of critical race theory, which I don't want to get into in detail, from my perspective, there's nothing wrong with critical race theory except for one thing. It has eliminated Jews from its consideration. So we need to be re-entered into the lexicon of diversity and inclusion in college campuses and across the United States as one of those groups that has been discriminated against, like other groups that have been discriminated against. That inclusion is critical and important.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. So I wanted to go to a couple of more shares. I think Michelle mentioned that we've got a couple.
Yep. So we've got two stories shared in the chat. The first person says that a coworker at a small family business that they used to work at said that he wanted all Jews to die because they were responsible for Christ's death. They debated him and they took it back to HR, but ultimately HR did nothing with the complaints that they filed.
Wow, I mean, that's just a reminder that that you know, one of the issues that's at the core of the history of anti-Semitism is this accusation of Jews being Christ killers, right? And the whole idea that, as it says even in the Gospel of John, the Jews are the synagogue of Satan and are really this representation of absolute evil in the world, which is sadly still lingers today. Yeah, and the other one.
So the next person shares that they themselves have not experienced anti-Semitism, but while they were doing a study abroad in Spain, there was a message that had been written onto the wall that said, under its swastika, Madrid es Nazi, which translates to Madrid is Nazi. It was later removed, but the way that they phrased this, I'm not sure if it took 2 months to remove it or if it was back up again after 2 months. I'm not sure the way that they phrased it. It later got removed within 2 months of my semester.
Wow. So we also have some questions in the chat, and one of the issues really speaks. One of the questions really speaks to this ongoing, you know, misunderstanding about the U.S.-Israel relationship. The question is, do you think all this anti-Semitism has to do with how the U.S. has always protected Israel and imports the majority of things to Israel? Wondering, Danielle and Sam, if either of you would like to respond to that question.
Yeah, I'll give it a stab. The U.S.-Israel relationship is a mutually beneficial one. The U.S. gets as much, if not more, from Israel than Israel gets from the U.S. And the issue here is there are not a lot of democracies in the Middle East. You can count them on maybe 2 fingers. There are not a lot of democracies there. Israel is one of the only fully functioning democracies in the Middle East. It has problems with its democracy, but look at the US, we have problems too. It has been a stalwart supporter of US policy for its 75 years of existence, good and bad. Periods when US was treating Israel badly to periods when Israel and US were close friends and allies. But in the last 50 years, Israel and the US have formed a strong bond. That bond is both economic and it's military and it's intellectual, and it's also based on shared vision of a democratic world. So the idea that US is the protector of Israel is at one time probably had some value. It certainly did in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, when the US came through and gave military support to Israel, and certainly after the 6-Day War when LBJ helped support Israel. But in the last 20, 30 years, Israel has been a stalwart supporter of the US, providing the US with significant and important intelligence, technology, computer, science, all kinds of things that are now at the core of what drives the engine of both Israel and the US technology and artificial intelligence, things of that sort. So that idea that the US is protecting Israel and it's a one-way street is not true at all.
Thank you, terrific, thanks. So I also want to move to Danielle. There's a question for you, but it also is part of how I'd like to pivot now, and the last few minutes of our conversation, to what can we do, right? What kind of constructive things? How can listeners and participants in the panel come away from this with a sense for an action item, one thing that somebody can do? And the specific question says a lot of anti-Semitism takes place online. How can we best use social media to combat anti-Semitism both on campus and off?
Well, speak up. That is yesterday, Dr. Edelman said it perfectly, and I wrote it down when we had a pre-discussion. He said, Anti-Semitism thrives in silence of the perceivers, thrives in the silence of the perceiver, and don't be a bystander. And when you are a bystander, you are complicit. I see my social media is now up on the screen. You are totally welcome to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. It's the same handle, it's my name. I talk about Jewish issues and Israel issues and teach about Judaism and Israel. And I'm happy to answer different questions that aren't answered in this call about my Zionism and my Jewish activism. Yeah, you're welcome to follow me. But my biggest advice on how you can be an ally would be to speak up. When you see something going on, post about it, speak out against it. And most importantly, you have to educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. It's so important to know what you're talking about. If you're passionate about something, you need to know what you're talking about. And I saw another question in the comments about Zionism, being Jewish and how to be a Zionist on campus. It's important that you know what you're talking about. When someone is criticizing Israel, you need to know about all of the times in history that Israel has offered two-state solutions to the Palestinians. It's not a simple solution. It's not a one-way street. So you just really take it upon yourself. If you care about an issue and want to feel comfortable enough to talk about it, you need to educate yourself. So I really implore you guys to take a second and find different sources on social media. You can go on my page. I'm constantly reposting different amazing sources. And I hope that helps, and speak up. Yeah. Thank you.
So how to fight back against it. Danielle said it very well. It helps to repeat. When you see something, say something. If somebody is saying something and you are in presence of somebody who's saying something that's outrageous, even if it's not outrageous, about Jews or Israel or Zionism, that is beyond the pale, that is one of the 3Ds. First of all, knowing the 3Ds and keeping that as part in your head is very important. Say something. As I said I've said over and over, my wife and I have been teaching Holocaust and genocide studies for decades. And it is clear that those who perpetrate this kinds of discrimination exist when there is silence. For example, when every time Hitler did an anti-Jewish thing, he stopped and waited to see what the world's response was. And when there was silence, he said, and his policymakers said, aha, the world is silent. That means they accept what we're doing. Silence is affirmation. And so when you are silent in the face of outright discrimination or anti-Semitic behavior, even if anti-gay, anti-Black, whatever it is, don't be silent. Confront them. Let them know that what they said has gone beyond the pale and doesn't deserve to be listened to. And that's a risk for you. There's no question. It's hard to do that, but that's an important step, is not to be silent. Another thing is reach out to organizations that you belong to, who or are involved in, whether they're religious or cultural or whatever. And the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism happens to be a useful one for people to understand, because people don't have a grasp of what anti-Semitism is. And the IHRA definition is very important. Just for example, when the US Department of Education civil rights arm was confronting going after those universities and colleges which were discriminating against Jews, their cases were being thrown out right and left until they accepted the IHRA definition. And the moment that they accepted that definition and used it as part of how they go after discriminators on college campuses, they began winning court cases. That definition was very important for the protection of Jewish students on college campuses under Title VI. And it's very useful in your organizations and for you generally. And the 3Ds are very important as well. And last but not least, all of us, whether we are Jewish or not Jewish, need to help our diversity and inclusion staff on college campuses understand the importance of knowing and understanding what anti-Semitism is, because they're the ones who are going to have to deal with these issues on whatever the campus is. And I know FIU has a strong diversity and inclusion group, and FIU has been very successful. They've included the IHRA definition. So your campus is well attuned to this. And so I think those are some concrete things that can be done.
Thank you, Sam. Danielle, you want to jump back in?
Super speed, really awesome opportunity too. I'm in contact with FIU's Hillel. I want you guys to know, I assume students on this call are interested in these subjects, and the fact that you hold these conversations on a weekly, monthly basis are amazing. There's an opportunity at your university through your FIU Hillel for both Jewish and non-Jewish students. In August, they will be doing an MTF fact finder trip. I went on one at my university. They take 20 students who are not Jewish, student leaders, and 5 Jewish leaders from your campus. And you will be taken on a trip to Israel to explore both sides of the conflict. For me, that helped me speak about Israel and speak about the conflict and Zionism much more passionately and with an educated basis. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm dropping the link right now in the comments, but I highly encourage any of you to go to Hillel and ask your Hillel for an application to apply for this opportunity of fully all expenses paid trip to Israel for 25 students, 20 non-Jewish, 5 Jewish students, to learn about Israel from both sides. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we want to start wrapping it up. I want to make one very obvious point, but I think it needs to be said. Anti-Semitism is just a fancy word for Jew hatred. And hatred of Jews. And as one person commented in the chat, the more that we use us versus them language, right, the more you open the door to hatred and prejudice. So not only do we need to stand up to incidents of Jew hatred whenever and wherever we see them, even at risk, personal risk, but we also have to stand up to any kind of hatred. And the more that we show that we will not tolerate the mainstreaming of hate, the normalization of hate in our society, I think ultimately the better things we'll do. I know there are more questions and comments. I'm sorry that we don't have time for everything. On your screen, you see our backdrop for Holocaust and Genocide Awareness Week, which continues through this Friday. I want to just note all of our wonderful co-sponsors that are listed on the slide. And I also want to mention that our next event is going to be tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. It's on post-Holocaust religious fluidity with Shannon Allen and Hannah Massey. It's both, it's a hybrid event. It's both Zoom accessible and also accessible in person at 3 p.m. in Ryder Business Building, room 120 at 3 o'clock tomorrow. But you can find the full schedule of events here on the slide. And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to our full schedule. And then finally, I just want to mention, of course, we're very, very grateful to the Office of Global Learning Initiatives and the Tuesday Times Roundtable for initiating this event and partnering with us on this event. And I also want to mention that we have a survey on the screen now, and I'll put it in after the schedule of events. I'll put that in the chat as well. So here's the schedule of events coming at you now. And if you'd like to participate in the survey, we will have a drawing at the end of the week for a $50 Amazon gift card if you choose to share your information at the end of the survey. So here's the survey link for you, and over to Michelle for final words.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers for joining us today. This was an absolutely insightful and very much appreciated conversation about our contemporary life. Again, if you would like to hang out and ask any questions, Anna and I will be here in the Zoom for just a little while longer. Again, next week, I'm sorry, we go back to in-person programming over at GC 150, where we'll have our TTR session where new ideas thrive, the power of innovation hubs. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll hang out for a little while. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.